That's why.
Okay. Well, my name is Harvey Ardman, and I had the privilege this year of managing the Golden Quill contest. And it was a very spirited competition, I must say. We have a number of very good writers in this group, some of whom are here tonight, and many who are not. And I'm not just speaking about the winners. The winners are very good, but there are some people who are very good who are not winners. Maybe next year they will be. I hope so. First thing I'd like to tell you is that we had 3 categories this year: fiction or short story, poetry, and memoir or nonfiction. Unfortunately, memoir category did not excite anybody. We had 1 entry. And I felt that this was not a competitive race. So there is no prize for nonfiction this time. But next time, that's all. The first person I'd like to introduce is Sarah Green, who sits here in front, who was the winner of last year's poetry contest. She was considered to be the judge for this year's poetry contest, and we have a very interesting situation with that, which she'll tell you all about. Sarah?
Well, hello everyone. Firstly, I want to say it's been an honor and privilege to act as judge for this year's poetry section of the Golden Quill contest. Judging blindly, and I think all the sections were judged blindly, I had no idea who the writers were of any of the poems entered. Secondly, a huge thank you to Harvey Ardman as director of the whole contest. And you did a lot of good work sorting and sending out poems and stories. Thank you. As a poet myself, I have come to realize that each and every poem captures the totality of the person who wrote it in that moment in time. We constantly move forward and inward as we write, each poem a distillation of a moment of feelings and emotions in that person's life. But a poem is not isolated in time, even if the person writing it has to have those moments of isolation to write what comes forth. A poem speaks the emotions we dare not utter or cannot utter to even those close to us. Therefore, poetry is our lifeline, connecting us and our inner worlds to the world outside. Now, I'd like to honor this year's winners. The theme for this contest was tomorrow, a word that conjures up many thoughts. It proved a difficult task to come up with just 1 winner. Therefore, I chose to give joint first prize to 2 poems, 2 writers, very different from each other. Both tugged at my heartstrings and both have an underlying message for us all. First, I'll ask Michelle Turner to come up and read her poem, The Tomorrow. And I just want to say, Michelle is a member of SLO Night Writers. She's writing a novel inspired by her years working as a public defender. And she also writes short stories and poetry. And I have something here for you. Congratulations, Michelle.
Thank you so much.
A very expensive dessert in there. Don't lose it.
Okay, well, thanks. Before I read, I was just going to, for those who don't have it in writing, the name of the poem is The Tomorrow, and the tomorrow is a family yacht. So I'll begin now. I earned my sea legs at the age of 3, coursing the Gulf, our small family. The tomorrow was our ocean home, a yacht with bed and bath to roam. She cut into the cresting waves so strong, to worthy adventures far and long. We often anchored at sunny midday in the blue waters to splash and play. I learned to float and then to swim and run the rocking boat on a whim. By the time my birthday cake said 5, my dad had taught me how to dive. Our favorite day toward the end, we anchored on an island bend. The beach spread wide, sanded in white, nestled between palm trees and clear water delight. We floated on rings with bright fish below, then put on some snorkels and said hello. We called it our little paradise. For 2 years after we lived on the land, I went to school and played in the sand. In kindergarten, I grew in the light. I learned in 1st grade to read and write. Dad told us he missed the sea. It was time for the tomorrow's liberty. We packed summer clothes and went to the dock, where she waited beside a small seagull flock. Our little paradise was the course we set. In a few days we arrived, used to the wet. While Mom and I sat on our balmy white beach, Dad climbed on a coconut out of reach. We hiked to find him just off the shore, his head on a rock and nothing more. It was the day I turned 7 that my dad floated to heaven. We slumped in the jungle forest, shedding our tears. I didn't know it was only the start of Mom's fears. Our little paradise clouded over. We wanted a burial at sea, she cried, but he kept coming back because of the tide. I watched Mom dig a great big hole. We had a ceremony and placed a marker pole. I asked Mom when we'd go home. Tomorrow, she whispered, staring at sea foam. The next day, she hardly talked. I built sandcastles and slowly walked. After a week, I asked, when can we go? Like before, she told me, tomorrow. More days passed and I went to Dad's tomb. I shared with him my feelings of gloom. The stars of the evening shone lively and bright. I swam to our boat and turned on the light. I discovered a can of red spray paint and held it as though I'd found a saint. In the morning, the yacht shined in the bay. In letters sprayed bold, I had renamed it today. We blew kisses as we left our little paradise. Michelle, you put your pin for us.
Thank you very much, Michelle.
Thank you.
That was really frightening poem at one point, but I just love the way you ended it there, like the renaming of the little boat to today. Next, we have the other first prize winner is George Asdell. And I believe he's on Zoom. I just want to say about George.
You should see
Here we are. He was born in Santa Ana, California. He's been a storyteller on Catalina Island, an artist in a fishing village in Newfoundland, Canada, and a teacher in a one-room schoolhouse near Julian, California, and other school districts in California. His poems and art have won awards and are shown in Marina Square Gallery up in Morro Bay. He is also a puppeteer, a puppet script writer, and co-owner of a family counseling office with his wife, Kathy, and a member and facilitator of the Atascadero Writers Group, started by Jane Elston. I believe Harvey Ardman is going to read your poem, George. Congratulations. And there'll be something in the mail for it.
Shouldn't you put your
Oops, damn.
Shouldn't you put your picture on instead of?
Sound is on.
I actually had two things to read from George. One is a brief remark about his award. It says, I want to thank the SLO Night Writers and the Golden Quill Award Selection Committee for choosing my poem, With New Eyes, to be tied for first place. I wish my health were better so I could attend the meeting in person. I hope to be there on Zoom. I think he is there on Zoom. My poem was a real situation. I wanted to contrast the Doomsday Clock Committee predictions on my computer with the reality of the newborn robins and her fawns, twin fawns that I could see out my window. And the poem is called With New Eyes. I'm watching my computer. Members of the Doomsday Clock Committee are speaking. They just moved the hands to 90 seconds before midnight. I look out our living room window. I see a robin with its orange belly hopping from branch to branch in our leafy mulberry trees, feasting on the sweet purple fruit of spring. On either side of a 6-foot fence, I notice a black-tailed deer going nose to nose with our neighbor's dog. Soon I see the cause of her unusual behavior. She has just given birth to twin fawns in the tall grass under the mulberry tree. Hidden in the branches in the robin's nest, her fledglings are ready to take flight. The newborn fawns stand on wobbly legs, the mother licking their young bodies. Unaware of tomorrow or predictions made by the Doomsday Clock Committee, small birds and fawns look around with new eyes at the wonders of today.
Thank you, thank you, thank
I think you need to
Yes, I
do
am.
the next
Yes,
part of the.
yes, I think I remember. The second half of our presentation involves the fiction category. And we have as our judge this year, last year's second place winner, David Brandon. David, would you please come up and introduce the winners?
Thanks, Harvey. By the way, the Doomsday Clock, for those who don't know, is on the cover of the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists every month, and it moves up and down. So let's see. We had 15 stories based on this theme tomorrow. They were all well-written, imaginative, interesting, and some of them got a big laugh. I didn't know who the authors were. And in choosing the winning stories, it came down to basically relying on the fundamentals, necessary writing points for short stories, like the hook and the twist. And your challenge is to figure out which is which in my first and second place winners. So first place goes to Judith Ganera. The story, The Disappearing Spouse. She's an active member of Night Writers. She also writes monthly columns for writing organizations. She's a presenter, writing coach, editor, and author of 29 Sneezes. And I've known her for a long time, active in a bunch of committees and Night Writers. She recently published Volume 1, Stronger Together, in her Connection series, and she collaborated with her husband on their Tales of the Sierra series. The Disappearing Spouse is written in a screenplay format with some very interesting character arcs of the protagonist and the antagonist. Judith, would you like to come up? So I have a award certificate and a check for you. According to Harvey, we give the checks now because it's not a reward for reading your story.
Okay. Steve and Dennis. By the way, if you get me sometime with a glass of wine, I'll tell you what the inspiration for this story was, but I won't say it here. I appreciate that another opportunity. I have been entering the Night Rider contest since I joined Night Riders, which was around the turn of the century. And I got one honorable mention during all that time. So, come on, Dennis. So this was,
for all of us.
there's hope for everybody. Exactly my message. When I wrote The Disappearing Spouse, it sort of fell into a screenplay. I mean, sometimes when I write prose, all of a sudden I realize it's poetry and I end up writing a poem, and that's kind of what happened here. The one thing I didn't consider was, what do I do if I win? How do I read 3 characters and a narrator and get the voices of them different? So got my husband, Steve, and my friend, Dennis, and they were quite willing to do 2 of the parts, and I will do the one part and the narrator part of it. We have a protagonist, and the protagonist's name is ex-wife. We have Strictly Moral Conscience, and that's Dennis. And by the way, Dennis said, I never thought I would be your conscience. And I said, yeah, especially a moral one. And then my husband, anybody knows Steve knows that he is a real techie for everything. So he's my sympathetic techie conscience. All right, ready? The scene is the ex-wife's living room. The day is All Hallows Eve. Act 1, time shortly before dusk. Ex-wife, damn, I wish he was dead.
Whoa, wait a minute. You're talking about the father of your kids.
I don't care. He's unreasonable, mean, a cheat, despicable, demeaning, dastardly, and he broke my heart.
When you married him, didn't you say he was the love of your life?
Yeah, so he's not anymore. I hate his guts. I can't stand the sight of him. He makes me so angry.
Really? Or are you just spouting off because he's got a new girlfriend?
And that's another thing. The ink on the divorce papers isn't even dry yet, and he's banging some teenage floozy. I hate him. I wish he was dead.
No, you can't mean that. What would you do if he showed up dead? Wouldn't you feel guilty? Like you caused him to die?
Heck no, I'd be happy, so relieved. No one would miss him if he were gone. He's such a loser. And least of all me, I wouldn't miss him even a tiny iota. Why can't he be dead?
Okay, take a breath. Think how devastated your kids would be if he died. And his girlfriend, his mother, his siblings. We've got to come up with some other way to get him out of your hair.
Maybe, but it would have to be a surefire way. No getting rescued and showing up at my door again.
Wait a minute. I just read something. Hang on. Ah, here it is.
He's looking at his computer. Okay. What? Tell me, the suspense is awful.
This isn't some kind of dark magic, is it? I can't let you perform dark magic.
Please, let's just see what he has to say. Aren't there ways to sanitize dark magic?
Okay, listen to this. There's a spell you can put on someone who's causing you pain.
I told you, no dark magic.
Moral conscience, you're such a dweeb. Why do you always think the worst? No one said it was dark magic. Go ahead, Techie.
Well, this has several steps. You list everyone in his whole lifetime who ever knew this person you want to disappear, and you put a spell on them so they forget he ever existed. No memories, no broken hearts, no anguish, no pain, no loss. Next, you put a spell on the person you want to disappear. In this case, your ex-husband, and he disappears. It says he goes off to some nice kind of place like a first-class lounge at the airport. He has every comfort, including an unlimited bar tab, and he forgets his previous life entirely. He can party all day and all night. You said that's what he likes to do, isn't it? And there's always new people popping up that he can hook up with.
Sounds intriguing. And you're sure nobody would miss him or shed tears over him being gone or anything?
That's what it says.
Oh, this is so bad, so black magic-y. How can you even think of doing this?
Oh, stow it, moral conscience. I like this more and more. Does it cost me anything, money or my house or anything? And you're sure I won't go to jail?
Good question. Let me check.
The narrator, Techie bends over his tablet and reads his lips moving and his finger following the words on the screen. He looks up, it says nothing. His eyes cross, his hands shake. Ex-wife, uh-oh, I knew there had to be a hitch. Narrator, as Techie shudders, ex-wife clutches her heart. Come on, tell me, the suspense is killing me. Oh, bad choice of words.
Well, there's no downside as long as the spell doesn't slip. If it slips and someone besides the person who dispatched him remembers him, he comes back as though he'd never been gone, and he resumes his old life. He's back to your kids, his other family members, his girlfriend.
Dang, and then he'd be driving me crazy again.
No, not really.
Narrator, Techie refuses to look at ex-wife. Why not? What am I missing?
Funny you should say missing. If someone remembers him, it means the spell had a weak link. It slips, and when he comes back, whoever disappeared him, you in this case, take his place. You disappear and no one remembers you.
No one, not even my kids or my sister or my best friend.
Sorry, that's what it says.
What if that spell slipped and someone remembers me? Then I come back and he's gone again, right?
Sorry again, the spell only works twice. If it happened like you described, you'd still be gone forever.
What? Oh, good Lord, what happens then?
When you disappear, you wouldn't go to the first class lounge with all the good food and drinks and entertainment. You just disappear forever.
Narrator, moral conscience stands there during the recitation of this new development. A horrified look distorts her face. She turns to Techie and says in a whisper,
What about heaven? Wouldn't she go to heaven?
Are you kidding me? I think she'd better just hope she's gone, period. Disappeared, impossible to locate, instead of burning in, hell.
narrator, Techie and ex-wife both gasp. Gasp. She sinks into a chair, the questions spinning in her head immediately propel her out of the chair. Her horrified eyes tear around the room looking for something. She takes a breath.
Still zooming, or you just got down?
That's another story. Okay, let's run through that one more time.
You can't really be considering this. Dark, magic. What if it doesn't work and he's in pain and he...
Now that sounds even more enticing. In pain, huh?
It says here the spell works 95% of the time.
See their moral conscience? 95% of the time. That's good, right?
Yeah, right. After all, you fell in love with this schmuck, thinking he was a good deal and all. Seems like your luck ran out on that one. You'll probably be one of the 5% that it fails for.
95 to 5 odds. Sounds good to me. Nothing's going to slip. What do I do first? The scene fades. Act 2, slightly later. Narrator, moral conscience is nowhere in sight. The panic he left behind is palpable. Ex-wife is flitting around the room, anxious to begin.
I wish your moral conscience were here. You know I'm not a huge fan of dark magic either, don't you?
I know, but we talked about this. My ex really is a first-class slug. You know, the world would be better off without him, and I would be too. You love me, don't you? Want me to be rid of this blight of my life, to be happy again?
Yes, of course I do. And like you said, it's not like anyone would grieve for him because memories of him would disappear, just like he would. Okay, let's see what the next step is.
Narrator, the two pore over the instructions on the tablet. They read that they'll need a few strands of his hair, his ID and pictures and contact information for all the people who've known him well. With the arrival of the pandemic, they realize the broad use of Zoom will enable them to get everyone virtually in the same place at the same time. On the pretense that someone is planning a party for his 50th birthday, everyone responds to the Zoom. They cannot see the black magic altar that has been set up in the background with key items from his life. Unbeknownst to the participants, Techie, who has reluctantly practiced for hours, puts everyone under a spell and erases ex-wife's husband completely from their memories, as well as their memory of the Zoom. Everyone is back where they were before the Zoom, just going about their business. Act 3, time, 1 week later.
It sounds like the spell worked.
I think so, hard to tell. His spousal support check didn't come.
What will you do without his check?
Oh my God, I never thought about that. What will I do?
Gee, maybe you'll have to get a job.
Now, Techie, don't be mean. Can't you see ex-wife is upset?
Well, at least I didn't say I told you so.
Act 4, time, 6 months later. Narrator, ex-wife had to get a job at a convenience store. She is always exhausted. Ex-wife, the spell worked just like it was supposed to. No one has mentioned my ex. It's like he never existed. I had the weirdest thought today, though. If he never existed, wouldn't my kids have disappeared too? And why do I still have this house? He bought it. Or my car. If they didn't disappear, why did my spousal support checks disappear?
I think we've got a slip here. If so, one can only wonder what's next.
Ex-wife, are you regretting that you dispatched him to another world?
No. Well, maybe a little.
Do you really think he's happy in that big lounge, wherever it is?
Who cares? Oh, heck, who am I kidding? I should never have done this. I thought he was such a pain. Is there anything?
Sorry, there are no do-overs, right, moral conscience? Ex-wife, you're responsible for what you did and you're stuck with the consequences.
I've got a headache. I'm going to bed. Maybe I'll dream of a way to fix this. Act 5, time, tomorrow. Narrator, ex-wife looked out the window and noticed her ex's dog digging in the yard. He disappeared at the same time as his master, but she hadn't given it much thought. As she watched, the dog came across something and pawed it frantically. He uncovered a ball, the one her ex had used when he played catch with him. Both had really enjoyed it.
How sweet. Look at the dog. He's licking the ball and circling around it. He's always waiting for someone to play catch with him.
Narrator, the dog sits back on his haunches, raises his head, and howls as though he's lost his best friend. Ex-wife runs to the window. An eerie wail seems to encircle her. She thinks about those movies where someone describes feeling disembodied. Well, she feels really strange. She could see her arms and legs, but as she looks, they begin to fade. For just a second, she catches a glimpse of the backyard. Her ex stands there. He throws the ball, and the dog, yipping and yapping, chases after it, retrieves it, and drops it at his master's feet, happily drooling all over his shoes. The scene fades. Ex-wife, disembodied, floats through a heavy mist. Fear catches her around her waist and heaves her into sheer blackness. Ex-wife, I thought it had to be a person who remembered my ex to bring him back, but a dog? Narrator, her voice fades away. She hears moral conscience sobbing and a mirthless laugh emanating from Techie.
And she wouldn't listen. After the first slip, I told her the spell slipped once. I warned her.
Narrator, ex-wife reaches up and touches her eyebrows and hair, which feel warm and smell charred. This was the price she'd have to pay for making that choice. Yes, for tomorrow and for all eternity. Thank you.
Let that be a lesson. It's okay.
I have one comment about that story, Judith.
Yeah.
Oh, Henry would praise you for that story, for that twist at the end. So our second place story is called Freezer Burn. The author is Matthew Green. Is Matthew Green here? Oh, all right, far out. So Matthew is an active local fiction writer who teaches at Cuesta. Former film editor in Hollywood, he received an MFA in creating writing at Antioch University. He's currently shopping a novel and nonfiction book and has had several short stories published. Freezer Burn invites some obvious questions. which the characters struggle to answer. And in a sense, they expose the myth of closure. And I hope I didn't give away the story. Back to you. Yeah. And I have a certificate from SLO Night Riders and thank you. You're welcome.
I have to read it on the screen. At least in part inspired by my Minnesota aunts and great aunts. Been talking all day. Christ almighty, Mary Pat, that dead cat's still in your freezer, Sister Kate said, swirling the dregs of her vodka cranberry and downing the last bit. She chopped the feeble remaining ice cubes as she offered the Tom Collins glass to Mary Pat, who filled her back up and shook her head. Some language for a nun, and I don't want to talk about it. The three old ladies stared out at the azure lawn from their ochre-stained porch, latticed from the back of Mary Pat's two-story and ending at the green space and long stairs. Lifelong friends ensconced around a wide wicker table, whiling away the hottest days in August with lies and admonitions and vodka. It was so hot, light itself was warped at a distance, everything above the dark green a swirling, humid question mark. A young deer plucked at the wild blackberries that fringed the property line before it gave way to cornfields. The fawn moved languidly, sapped by the heat and unafraid of the company. Okay, Mary Pat, so there's no plan there, Sister Kate asked, lighting a cigarette and giggling softly, brushing an ash off her black habit. She always sounded a mixture of Irish and Norwegian to Mary Pat, though she'd lived neither place. It was as if her very genes had acquired a voice. Or perhaps it was merely a lifetime of Minnesota leaking out of her. I said, I don't want to talk about it, Mary Pat said, pouring herself a shot from the Smirnoff leader, remnants of ice froth drifting on the bottom from its life lived in the freezer. She gulped and slammed the little glass on the table, her powerful arms jiggling with fat. Halfway through her drink, she laughed, which made her cough, lungs burning. Cackles came from Sister Kate and a high whine from Kitty. Mary Pat hunched over, hands on her knees, and hacked it all out, her back wide from decades of hard farming. You're a goddamn mess, Kitty said, laughing as she balanced her teacup. Kitty was dainty, but kept the sharp, dark eyes of a killer. Her spells of day drinker were long gone. Hell, drinking had all been off the table for at least the last 5 years, as far as any of them could tell. That was for the best anyway, and everyone knew it. How many years ago that damn thing died, Sister Kate asked. Mary Pat exhaled and sat carefully in her chair. She bore her sighs with a nimble, easy grace. 10, I guess it must be now. Jesus. Do you think the Lord takes kindly to you using his name all over the place now, Sister Kate? Kitty asked, darting her black Irish stare, equal parts mischief and mirth. We've come to an understanding, Sister Kate said. Yeah, what's that? Kitty asked. I get to say whatever the hell I want after a life spent serving no other man but him. They all laughed and had another round, but Sister Kate wasn't ready to let it go. No, they all knew she had a moral obligation to upend rocks, and there was something underneath that boulder of Mary Pat's, more than a dead cat, even though they knew good and damn well why that thing was still in the freezer. 10 years is a long time there, Mary Pat. Sister Kate started up again, and Mary Pat thought of punching her in her pointy face. But she was one of God's spokespersons, and she loved her too much, even though she hated Kate, something terrible sometimes. Yep, she said, sighing and sitting down and putting her face in her drink. What you been waiting for? Kitty asked. Supposed to bury Vernon at Carl's farm. What she wanted, Mary Pat said. Still nothing from Grace then, Kitty said after a long silence. No. There was another long empty space, the one that echoed Mary Pat and her estranged daughter's years of silence. Kitty sipped her tea and clinked the saucer on the glass table near it neatly. Well, I say you throw that old cat out. Say 3 Hail Marys over the garbage can. Get some closure. Mary Pat snorted. Closure. Tell us how that's going for you and Charlie, she said, and Sister Kate laughed. And Mary Pat laughed, and finally Kitty did too, even though that one cut too close. They kept drinking until everyone forgot and didn't bring it up again. Irish secrets and late nights with old ladies always moved on like weary cattle, grazing wet grass with heads down and mouths open. The next morning, before the late summer sun had punched its way over the horizon, Mary Pat heard the garbage trucks a half-mile off. The squealing of the brakes cut through the blue-gray Minnesota air like a warning bell. She crawled over Larry, kept in the plastic cocoon of his CPAP machine, and looked out the window. She could see the lights blossom on the other side of the highway a full 10 minutes away. The whole fleet was advancing, sent ungodly early to punish the drunks every Saturday morning. Her morning dress felt stiff and icy as she smoothed it over her aching body and walked down the stairs. She stood lost in the middle of the kitchen, her head caving in on itself, as if there was a pocket of absolute emptiness in the center, a black hole devouring everything around it. That special kind of vodka hangover. God damn you, Kitty. She opened the fridge and took out a can of PBR, sucking a long, shaky swallow, and found herself in the garage, standing in front of the tall freezer. The whines from the garbage truck were louder. She pulled the door open, taking another draw of beer with the other hand, and bent down, her knees and hips cracking. Reached all the way back on the bottom shelf as if she didn't have to look for it, because she sure didn't. That infernal thing was where her mind's eye knew it was, always, resting right where those dreams kept her memory sharp. She had to yank hard on the tied top to dislodge the cat and its double plastic. It gave way with a snap from the bed of ice that had formed around it. Beer slopped on her slippers and ice chunks clanked on the concrete before the cat flew free and swung around past her. Mary Pat shut the freezer and stood up with more clicking from her knees and ankles and had a good look at the thing. It was shaped like a giant overcooked shrimp, curled up and whitish pink, completely covered in ice except for the very tip. The whiskers and mouth and left eye of Vernon butted up against the hazy plastic, bunched by the thick red twist tie she'd stolen from Grace's old sleeping bag. She stared for a great while, waiting for the eye to blink or the teeth to chomp to complete the mid-hiss that Vernon had been perpetually frozen in. Jesus. She downed the half beer and stared again. Jesus, Mary Pat. She drained the rest. The garage door opened with its own age clicking and rumbling, and Mary Pat stood waiting. The blue light made her an impressive shadow, like a wide stooped warrior awaiting her last battle. The air was cool and thick, the grass and edges of the driveway wet as if it had rained, but it was only the dew of late August. Fall was in the air for the early morning, but summer remained everywhere else. She walked out to the row of receptacles lined at the curb. The empty beer can goes in the blue and the cat goes in the gray. Today, damn it, today. She looked at all the bottles and spoils from last night and debated whether to go back inside and stuff Vernon back in the freezer, past the old hams and roasts. Go back to bed to be lulled to sleep by the awful rhythm of Larry's CPAP. The truck's brakes screeched closer again, and she held her breath and tossed the freezer-burned cat from her daughter that she'd never see again on top of this week's refuse. She threw it like a heavy hammer, suddenly too much for her, heavier than anything she remembered since maybe her first bale of hay she'd heaved onto her dad's truck bed as a young girl. It made her sway and crash into the garbage bin. She steadied herself and closed the top and stood there, panting and crying now. She hadn't done that about Grace for so long, and here she was again. The trucks were close and she waited. Grace had gone missing, that she knew, and had never told her old drinking buddies. No reason to. Gone out of touch, gone missing, dead. There's not a lick of difference between them except when you find out for sure, when you get closure. But Grace's ex Carl was dead 5 years now, and there was no one else who knew jack shit and no one else who was looking. Mary Pat knew damn good and well what had happened to her daughter. A mother knows, and for 10 years there'd been that same emptiness in her chest that was in her head, but that one never went away with a cold beer in the morning. The first truck was always the recycling, and its great mechanical arm sloshed all the empties into its belly like a broken chandelier of shame, reminding everyone the professional kind of drunks that they were. The driver winked and made way for the garbage truck behind him. Smears of dark filth showed on its back as it clutched her garbage and Vernon, the only thing left of Grace. Her daughter's cat that was supposed to be lying in peace at that Iowa farm where Carl had shot himself, and she could never bear to set foot again. Mary Pat watched the truck shake everything into its back and saw a white flash of poor frozen Vernon and felt lightheaded, like she might pass out. Her hands rested on her knees for a moment before she could right the ship and turn right back into the house, cinching her bitter dress tight. She said 3 Hail Marys for Kitty's sake over another Paps. It did nothing, as if there was such a silly thing as closure.
Did you grow up in Minnesota?
No. I was
That brings to a close our star ceremonies. I'm hoping next year we have even more entries and fill all the categories over the top. All of you are good writers. Write something. Submit it. Thank you.